Hi, and welcome to the Love Uncensored Summit. My name is Jackie Ophie, and I am absolutely thrilled to have you here. You're either here because you know me or you know one of the amazing speakers that we've had on this summit. However you came to be here doesn't matter, but what I do know matters is that there are no accidents, and the message that you're about to hear today from our beautiful speaker, Frowsa, is meant for you, so listen up. If there's anybody that you think would benefit from being part of the Love Uncensored Summit, I would absolutely love you to share this information. The more people who are feeling love, connected, and intimate, the less chance we have of war, violence, and aggression on our planet. And goodness knows we need as much love as we can right now. So if there's anybody out there that you think would benefit, please feel free to pass this information on. Today, I have the absolute pleasure of introducing to you a gorgeous woman who comes to us all the way from Texas in the United States of America, sharing with us her beautiful and divine message. But before I welcome her on, I'll just give you a very short introduction to a very long and expansive, amazing career that this woman has had. So Frowsa Drew, PhD, has worked across so many different organizations, including World Vision and the State Fair of Texas, and has also been MC for the Movement Day Greater Dallas. And I'm really interested to hear a lot more around those areas. Frowsa was also part of the documentary called Friendly Captivity, a film that follows a cast of 7 women from Dallas to India. She's the recipient of several honors, including the semi-finalists for the SNU TEDx Talks in 2012, and I'll get you to talk a lot more about that with us as well, Frowsa. Frowsa graduated with a PhD in Leadership and Change with a focus on social capital and relational leadership. She's also completed training through UNICEF on equity-based evaluations. She's the author of 2 workbooks for women. The first one is Ready for a Revolution, 30 Days to Jolt Your Life. And the second one is Rules of Engagement, Making Connections Last. Also, I am so excited to have you here to give us a little bit more insight into what it is that really truly helps with connection in relationships. But before we do that, I know I've missed a whole heap of the amazing experiences that you've had. So I'd love you to fill in a couple of gaps for us, who you are and how you got to do the work that you do.
Oh, thank you so much. I just want to say I appreciate the opportunity to be here with you and to share. So thank you. That's such a good question about how did I get to this place? I think it has been this journey of relationships. I remember being at a speaking engagement, and I typically do this piece where I show pictures of my life. And I recognized in doing that my life has been a series of these wonderful relationships that allowed me to do the documentary, which was a friend sending me an email saying, you need to go and do this. I think it's going to be a great experience. And I remember doing the screen test and thinking, oh my goodness, what if this is Survivor and they're going to drop me in the middle of some place and leave me and they're not telling me everything. And it was relationships that said, you need to go and do this. I don't think they're going to just drop you off in the middle of nowhere and you have to figure out how to get back home. So, with speaking at Movement Day, it was just a relationship of someone saying, I see something in you. And I think you have the possibility and the promise and the passion to deliver to this audience. And so it's really hard to think about how did I get here, but it really has been kind of this serendipitous life of wonderful people who've been a part of my journey, who've connected. And I'm a firm believer that relationships are critical to our happiness, to our success, to whatever we want that's positive in life.
I am so with you on all of that. When I look back, I'm so glad that you said that, because I will reflect. And as you're speaking, I'm reflecting on my own life and going, yes, everything, even this conversation is as a result of a relationship somewhere. So it is so powerful.
Yes, yes. And I think when we begin to tap into understanding who we are and the power of our own narrative, I think that that really helps with being able to connect to other people that we want to always hear people saying, oh, there's so many bad people, you know, and the world is so bad. And yes, there are terrible things that are going on. We just had an incident here in Texas of a number of people losing their lives. Even in the midst of those tragedies, there is goodness with people. There are people that are wonderful individuals. I think it's a matter of perspective and where we are. And even in the midst of, you know, these horrible situations, you see people coming together and you see love happening, even in the midst of such pain. And so there's something to be said about how our perspective can shape the relationships. I'm very fortunate because I have some amazing people in my life. And I think, again, our perspective, understanding our narrative will help us better connect to the people we want in our lives.
Yes, there is always two ways to look at anything, isn't there? We can purely see the tragedy in something, or see the tragedy and also see the beauty of what that brings out in the human. People are forced to connect with each other on such a different level, being so real with one another, as opposed to it being, you know, those fake easy conversations that are like, how are you? Yes, I'm fine. And everybody just keeps moving on. Those
Yes.
opportunities that exist outside of, inside of those tragedies is where it really does get real for us.
Yes, and you mentioned real, and I think about authenticity. I think part of the challenge with our world is, especially with social media, that it creates this space of people to be disconnected, but to also not be authentic. And so you find that people are connecting online, and then these relationships aren't very positive because they didn't start off being authentic to begin with. And I think it's very important. And that's why I always go back to the narrative. I think it's so important to examine your own story, the good, the bad, the ugly, because sometimes you will attract people into your space because you haven't dealt with certain issues in your life. And there is something about how our minds want to correct and heal situations that we will attract often those things to do that. Now, there are certain situations I'm very aware of that no one attracts horrible things that happen to them. That's another person who has a problem. And I'm not speaking on those situations of violations, but just in our day-to-day interactions with people, it's very important for us to think about how are we showing up and how are we being authentic and being able to use that to get what we want out of our lives.
You know, this really ties in so beautifully with the conversation that I had. One of our other interviews that we did was with a dating coach, and she had a very similar message, Frowsa, which was whatever it is that's going on up here for us, the narrative that we're having with ourselves is going to draw in the kind of people. So, you know, we were talking about when you're going out dating or looking to meet new people and create new relationships, that story that we're telling ourselves is what's going to keep drawing in the same people until, like the lessons.
Yes, and it is so important to talk about and begin to start dealing with healing. I think for so many of us, we can operate out of brokenness and begin to create more of that in our lives. I remember hearing a pastor say that you have a half person who gets with another half person and they create a whole mess. And I was thinking, oh my goodness, that is so true because we're expecting other people to fulfill us. And then if we're not being authentic and they're not authentic, what a mess that we create because we're expecting them to bring something to us that we haven't dealt with ourselves.
I see this in relationships a lot where people are reliant on the other person to fill in the gaps that they themselves haven't yet had the opportunity to fix themselves. And when I say fix, I mean to go and do the work that needs to be done to heal those wounds that you're talking about. And it does create a complete mess. And it also changes it from being energetically about what the other person is doing wrong as opposed to what is, you know, there's this constant feeling that something is missing, and it becomes the responsibility of the other person to fix it for us as opposed to us taking full responsibility for where we're at.
It is about this ownership of our stuff. And I think the narrative that we hear often in society is that it's those people, it's other people's fault, and not taking ownership in what we bring to the table in relationships. And it is so important to be aware and unpack your stuff. If you don't love yourself, it's going to be very hard to expect someone to love you because you don't even understand what love looks like. And so, how can someone give you what you won't give to yourself? I've met so many people who will say things like, I want a person who looks like this, and they've got to be this, and they've got to have this much money and drive this kind of car. And I'm always thinking to myself, well, do you have those things to offer as well? Because that's unrealistic that if that person has it and you don't bring that to the table, how is there going to be the connection that you're seeking to be there? So it's important that, in my opinion, for healthy relationships, for healthy connections to exist, it starts with having the healthy connection and healthy relationship with self.
Absolutely. And just as you're saying that, if we take it away from those monetary things that we're looking for, those external things, internally, if we're looking for somebody who has a great sense of humor, who is always on time, is loving and caring and nurturing, same thing. Let's reflect. Do you have those qualities? Because without them, it's like, how do you bring those two worlds together? And that's where the two halves will make a whole mess, because, somebody who has those things wants to see that in somebody else as well. So, I love going to use that in terms of two halves, you make a whole mess. I love that.
I do too.
Frowsa, in terms of the day-to-day work that you do, by work, I mean living out your passion. Tell us a little bit about what it is that you do.
So I work during the day. I do a number of things, but during the day, I work for the State Fair of Texas. The State Fair of Texas is the largest fair in the United States, and might be in the world. I'm not really sure, but we had, in 23 days last year, 2.3 million visitors. And this year, I know we had over 2 million. So in that short amount of time, that many people come out and have a good time. What I love about this event is you've got all these different people from different ethnic backgrounds, religion, age, coming together. There's no violence. People are just having a good time eating food that's probably not the best to eat, but tastes really, really good. And I always say all the walking helps you get it off, so it doesn't really matter. Just enjoy. But to be a part of an event like that is amazing. But my job is being director of community affairs. So I spend a significant amount of time outside of the 23 days connecting to the local community, whether that's through our educational initiatives, whether it's through community programs, or the philanthropy. I provide grants through our budget to fund some wonderful programs in our local community around building the capacity of nonprofits, or whether it's helping schools, or even looking at economic development, because our fair is located in an area that's economically challenged. And to be an engine with this huge revenue that comes in, to be an engine that can make a difference in people's lives is exciting to me, and to use resources to do that. So I love the fact that every day I get a chance to meet with new people, build relationships, and try to make a difference. And so that's my day job. After that, I spend a lot of time. I'm a mom and I'm married, and I spend a lot of time writing and speaking and trying to help people's lives better in any way that I can, using myself as an example of what can happen and what possibilities can look like.
Wow. So you you see relationships from that very big picture of how do we bring, the world, a community, next door neighbors, and people together in a way that really does help them connect for the bigger picture, not just for what's happening today in this little micro relationship on the planet. But it's more from a global perspective, coming all the way back to how does that impact and really make a difference on individuals' lives, because we know that community is one of the things that is so missing in so many areas where people feel disconnected, where they feel uncared for and unloved. That's huge.
Yeah, it's great work. I'm honored to be able to be a part of something bigger than myself. And I've often heard people say that if the dream is something that is easy for you to obtain, then it's not a big enough dream. And so the ideal of being able to every day try to make something better is so exciting. And to your point, it is through this lens of relationships. There is this theory that I love that's called relational cultural theory that talks about that there are these 5 good things that everyone should experience in relationships. And it talks about this mutual empathy, this awareness and understanding of diversity, that we're okay with not just people being different, but we're going to think differently, that everyone that comes to the table isn't going to have the same experiences that we do, and we're okay with that. But it looks at having a zest for life, and to use this framework in everything I do has been, for me, just a gift to have learned about this wonderful theory, and then to be able to say, how do we embed it in everything that we do, that we are looking at understanding when people may not agree. How do you listen and be fully present? Because in the area that we're in, there's some people that haven't been very happy. And so how do you listen and not take it personally and become defensive, but really be present in the moment and understand where people are coming from so that you can better connect? And sometimes I don't have answers. Sometimes the answer is just being present and going, I hear you. And I'm willing to work with you through this. Teach me so that I can learn. And so when I first started the job, I remember spending about 6 months listening. I would just go and meet with people to listen. And I find that in relationships, whether it's in a marriage, whether it's dating, whether it's your coworker, sometimes we miss out on so much because we're so ready to come with an agenda that we're not ready to sit and listen and allow people to vent. Sometimes it's uncomfortable, but allowing them to have the space to be free to share and express themselves is so important if we want to be able to move forward in community.
I really value that. And I love what you said, which is that you don't always have the answers. Sometimes it's just about being able to be there and listen and not feel like you're there to solve a problem, but simply, just being heard. And we know what that feels like. We honestly, as human beings, we know what it feels like when somebody is just there purely to listen. And it's so free. It's freeing.
Yes. Yes. And I mean, at the core of every human, it doesn't matter how different we are. At the core, we all want to feel that we've been heard, that we are valued, that we matter. And so the disconnect that I think we see so often in society is that people don't feel like they have the space. That's why you see some of the comments, I think, on social media that people, I don't know if people even believe some of the things that they write, because I think it is the attention. I want you to hear me. Let me see if you're there. And somewhere along the way, we've lost these spaces for people to spend time together. There's an author that I love his work, and his name is Robert Putnam, and he wrote a book in 2010 called Bowling Alone. And in this book, he talks about there used to be a time where people would bowl together, that they would have dinner parties and spend time with each other. And what he said is that started going away. And we don't have opportunities to intersect and connect to each other because when we come home, we drive straight into our garage, park our car and get out, and we don't really see our neighbors or talk to people. We're not in civic organizations and in groups where we can connect and meet people. And so much of our connections are online. And although that's a great way to bring the world together, it also can create a disconnect. You're seeing studies that show how many people on Facebook are depressed. And you're seeing young people who are doing cyberbullying, and there is this wonderful resource we have with technology, but it can also create this space of people not being connected to one another in an authentic and free space. And so how do we, and in a space that's respectful as well. And so how do we begin to start doing these face-to-face interactions and beginning to have, not just the use of technology alone, but spending time together, listening, and really enjoying the human experience together.
Very powerful, enjoying the human experience together. And when we look at, 20 years ago, what was the human experience? As you say, it was that connectivity, that and even 20 years ago, you know, the advent of mobile phones has changed a lot of the way that we communicate with each other. So it's not just the social media directly right now, but even 20 years ago. And I've got two sons, 22 and 20 years old, and they don't know a time without having that level of communication. It is incredible, and the expectation that is that's just all the time to access. So partially a little bit around discipline and going, okay, yes, this is a great tool, but understanding that is really all it is.
Exactly. It's a means. It's not the end.
Yeah, absolutely. Frowsa, I'm really fascinated by the work that you do around this relational connectivity. And so, can you say that you said there were those 5 aspects, the 5 steps within, and what did you call it? The relational.
It's relational cultural theory. It actually started out of this feminist theory out of Wellesley College. And Dr. Judith Jordan, who is really involved and active, you can see a lot of her work online. And they provide these wonderful institutes every summer, every other summer, where I had the chance to go up to Wellesley and learn more about this. And then last year in Minnesota. And so much of my research has been around how do you use this theory to impact communities. They've used it mostly in counseling. And it's something that it really does work when we begin to start thinking about, you know, zest for life and thinking about diversity and mutual empathy and just being available to people. I think having those traits as a part of our communication and a part of the way that we live in the world can really make a difference on having healthy, connected relationships.
Mm-hmm. The zest for life part I'm really curious about, because I see a lot of couples. So a lot of the work that I do is with people who've been in long-term relationships. You know, for myself, I've been married for 25 years this year. And one of the biggest challenges that I have with my partner is being excited about our relationship. It's, you know, especially about 7 years ago, things got to the point where it's like, oh, is this as good as it gets? So I really do get that zest for life and how that kind of shows up in long-term. Have you got any advice for whether they're in relationships or couples or not? It doesn't matter at all, because I think zest for life we can all do with it, all have that. You know, and it comes across, doesn't it? You can see when somebody has a zest for life. They can bounce out of bed, do things with excitement, or completely the other way, which is kind of drag themselves around for the day. Do you have any tips for anybody listening in terms of some of the work that you've done in this space using this model?
You know, I'm with you. I've been married 23 years, and 3 years we were together before that. And yes, you do go through these periods of looking at the person going, really? You? So I understand that. You know, I think what we have to be patient with is that relationships change. And media tends to inform the way we see relationships. So we expect it to be this hot, romantic, you know, throw me on the bed kind of activity every single day. And the reality is we've got to go to work. We have to cook. We got to clean something I need to do. We got to do all these different things because life requires it. And then introduce children and ailing parents and friends who have drama. And so sometimes you do want to fall on the bed alone. And being able to understand that journey is important. I think it starts off with being friends with yourself. But in that, I think it's learning to be friends with whoever you're with. I think the romantic piece is important, and that's a part of having zest for life, is having passion and finding things that you enjoy. And I think that's looking at how do you share that with the person that you're with. And sometimes there are things that they like to do outside of the relationship. Like my husband loves Taekwondo. I am not into it. I'm so happy that that's what he loves. He's tried to get me involved. I support him. I'm not kicking anything. But what I have learned is in supporting him to do that, he's happy. And so it doesn't mean that the zest for life always has to be something that we do together. I encourage people to find hobbies and activities outside of their relationships that they enjoy so that when you come back, you have something to share with each other and that you're excited and happy. I think we have this belief that we have to be together all the time. There's not enough conversation in the world for a relationship to have someone around them all the time. That's not going to work. It's not realistic. But when we go to work and we have friends and we have activities, some we do together, some it's important to do with other people, you can enjoy life and be excited about living. I often tell people, even my daughter who's 17, you need a bucket list. What is it that you want to accomplish? And thinking about those goals, and it doesn't have to be things like I'm going to be on Oprah. I would love that. But the reality is it can be very small things like I really want to go to this museum. They've got a new exhibit I'd like to see. How do you do that and enjoy having, whether it's the spouse, the person you're dating, to be a part of those experiences with you? But I think you have to define and own what makes you happy first before you can expect other people to bring that to you.
I think that is such great advice. And those moments where we're separated from our partner gives us the fuel for the next conversation that we have, which is a conversation with zest. When, you know, I can imagine your partner coming back from taekwondo. How did it go? Well, it was great. I kicked this, I did that. As opposed to sitting on the couch watching TV going, well, now what do we talk about? So really, you know, experientially, we need to go out and do things a little bit differently, for sure. Frowsa, how do you bring that?
And you cannot expect one person to do everything.
Sorry, can you say that again? You go.
No, you can't expect that one person to be everything for you. And so it's important to have people that bring fun and zest to your life. And that's why friendships are so important as well.
Yes, and talking about friendships, one of the things that I often say to my clients is, if you have couples who are your friends as well, it's choosing with a lot of care, you know, and you've maybe have experienced this yourself. We've got friends who are in great relationships with their partner. They speak beautifully about their partner. They hold them in high regard and have a high level of respect. And then we have some of our friends who, you know, are really struggling in their relationship, but have been there for a really long time, are very negative towards each other. They gossip about one another, and I find those conversations really, really challenging. So I'm mindful about who I spend my time with as well, in terms of what I can bring to their lives, but what they bring to mine as well.
Well, and when you have friends who are like that, especially if you're close to them and there's a level of investment that you have, I think it's sometimes reminding people why they got together to begin with. Because again, relationships go through these slumps. And it's challenging because it's expecting two people to come together and really try to live as one. That's hard. But I think it's helping your friends to be aware of what they're saying, because I think sometimes when people are so negative about what's going on in their relationships, they don't really hear themselves and what they're saying. I think it's a cry for help. And so how do you replay that and be the mirror to help them understand that at one point you did love this person? And if you're truly that unhappy, at some point, I'm the one who's going to say, so what are you going to do? What is the plan for you? Because after a point, it has nothing to do with the person you're with. It has to do with you and your happiness. And if that's not happening, you're making your kids miserable. You're making that person miserable. So at some point, when do you take responsibility and decide that either I've got to get this together and make this work, or it's not working and I need to walk away from that? And I do agree with you that it is important who you spend time with, because those conversations, after a point, if a person continues to be negative and they choose not to take ownership and they choose not to do anything about it, at some point that does begin to affect your energy. And so how do you protect your energy? There is a scripture that I love that says, do not throw your pearls to swine, without getting religious, but it is something that I'm very aware of, is that sometimes we have these very sacred things, our relationships, you know, things that are ideas that are important to us. And so why would you throw that out for people to trample who may not have the level of respect and value for that? And so you have to protect what's special to you, and that's your mind, that's your heart, that's your spirit. And so if someone's going to damage that, I think it's important to make sure that you have boundaries and walls that protect you, where you can still love them from a distance if necessary.
I really value that, Frowsa, because and I love that saying. I haven't heard it before, and I think it's never, don't throw your pearls to swines. Is that what it is?
Yes.
Wow. It's powerful. It says exactly what it means. And those things that we do treasure so closely to us, let's look after them. Not at the sake necessarily of throwing other people out, because yes, I agree with you. There are times in my own relationship where some of my friends have looked at me and gone, what's going on? You know, you're not your normal self. Check in with what's going on with your behaviors, or they'll do it with my partner as well, more likely with me than with my partner. But it's nice to have that reminder sometimes of actually your behavior is out of line, or somebody else to check in who knows you well enough to be able to do that. That's really powerful. Frowsa, I'm loving what you're saying. I think the message that you have is just so beautiful and powerful and refreshing in terms of helping couples understand some of the things that they can do inside of their relationship, but also for the beautiful work that you do within your local community, taking that out to a more global impact, because we know that happy communities are made up of happy people, and happy people don't do unhappy things unless they're ill. So I honestly value what the work is that you're doing. I think it's beautiful.
Thank you.
Absolutely, it's my pleasure. Is there anything that you would like to leave our listeners with, Frowsa? Any final message that you'd like to impart with us?
You know, I want people to love. I know that sounds so cliche-ish, but I think that there is such pain in this world right now. And seeing some of the things that are happening daily around our planet, I think it's so important for people to love themselves. I really am of the belief that when you love yourself, it is so hard to hurt other people. When you recognize the humanity and the divinity in each of us, that there is something that is so valuable that exists in every human being, whether you like them or not, whether that's your boss, your coworker, the person you're living with, regardless of who it is, that there is value in every human being. But in order to see that, I think you have to see the value in yourself. And so I would ask people to take the time to learn your own story, see your value and worth, love yourself, so that you are in the position to provide that for someone else, and that our world can begin to heal, because love is going to be the answer. And I think people look at that and go, that's so hokey. But the reality is that it is the most powerful thing. Love is even more powerful than hate. And we need right now a whole lot of love. And I think it can be done.
You're speaking my language. I agree with you. It can be done, and the power that we feel. I mean, we just look at what we can achieve through prayer, and if you're not spiritual or you're not religious, it doesn't matter, because it is such a powerful energy. Whether you see that through the eyes of God, or whether you see that through the eyes of spirituality, it's all the same. We're all connected through this divine network of love, and the power that we have when we access that can be really scary.
Yes, it's life-changing. And I think, I was telling my husband earlier, I think the problem is that because we're disconnected from God, we're disconnected from ourselves and from each other, because we can't see that in one another anymore. And that to me is so troubling, that we have forgotten that it is so much bigger than ourselves. And I'm hoping that the viewers will take that nugget away and begin to start looking at how do they love deeper and love more, whether it's themselves, their children, their spouse, or even in their local community? How do they go to people who may not seem to be very lovable because of whatever we perceive about people that are different than us? How do we go and love people? Because I've recognized no matter how different someone is, there is so much we still have in common. And part of that is the journey that we are on as human beings. So how do we do this journey together? Well, because we got to share this planet. So how do we figure out how to do that in a way that's uplifting and not dehumanizing?
I feel you. Frowsa, thank you so much for being here, for sharing your light, for your sharing your love and your absolute beautiful divine message with us. For those of you who've stuck with us and have listened to the end, our message is love. This is the Love Uncensored Summit, where we get to share this message with as many beautiful people out there as we possibly can. And sometimes those beautiful people might not even look like beautiful people to us because of the filters that we have that have been created over a lifetime. So have the courage to hit the forward button and send this to somebody who you think could live loving in their own life. Thank you so much for being here, and I look forward to seeing you on our next interview.